How do you force yourself to do things you don't want to do? The answer is don't. Instead, ask yourself why you feel the need to be forceful. Real quickly, I want to say up front that if you're going through something like depression or another mental health challenge, this perspective might not be the support you need right now, and that's okay if it doesn't land for you. This is just one path, one lens. You get to choose what resonates. So, who is this message for and why? I used to believe that a forceful approach was the only path to achieve what I wanted because that's what I was taught. And hey, maybe there are times where being forceful is the right approach for a particular moment for whatever reason. Or if you get immense satisfaction from it, by all means continue. I'm simply here to share an alternative approach for anyone that's interested. Like I mentioned, I used to force myself all the time to the point where I'd be curled up in bed crying because I couldn't continue to pressure myself to focus on work. Around 2008, I was attempting to work 10 to 12-hour days because at that time I was very determined to save up for my first house. I'd have a successful 11-hour day, and then the next day, I'd be curled up in bed crying because I just couldn't get myself to work. I felt defective because I couldn't, quote unquote, grind to the extent I thought I was supposed to be able to. When I finally bought the house, I remember asking someone with a significant influence over me at that time, "So I can relax now, right?" And they said, "Nope, time to pick the next goal." And that was the moment that I thought to myself, what? Is this what life is supposed to be? Forcing, suffering, sacrificing, brief fleeting moment of satisfaction when the goal is accomplished, then back to more forcing and suffering and sacrificing. And at that moment, a question was born within me. Is there a way to achieve what I want while also enjoying my life at the same time? It took a few years, but I am happy to share that I did eventually find an answer, and it's a resounding yes. The answer is address the underlying reason why you feel the need to force yourself. So, how do we address the underlying reason? It's almost always some sort of negative thought pattern, and those thoughts create a feeling of internal resistance that you then try to overcome with force. The key is to pinpoint those negative resistant thoughts and create new, better feeling thoughts that align with your goals. At this point, you may be thinking, but won't that take longer than just simply forcing yourself? Maybe initially, but in the long run, trying to overcome internal resistance that you're creating is actually very energy inefficient. And here's why. Picture that inner resistance as dead weight that you're carrying. As you move towards your goal, if you never address that resistance, you'll always be carrying that dead weight, which over time wears you down and, in my experience, often makes you a little grumpy. So compare this to spending a little time up front to clear the resistance first. Drop that dead weight and you'll feel lighter and happier and even able to move faster towards your goals. Here are 3 examples of how to clear some common resistant thoughts. Resistant thought: I can't do this, it's too difficult. Positive thought: this may be challenging, but I can break it down into smaller, manageable tasks and take one step at a time. Resistant thought: I'll never succeed, I'm a failure. Positive thought: success comes with persistence and learning. I will keep trying and adapting until I achieve my goals. Resistant thought: I hate change, it's too uncomfortable. Positive thought: change can be challenging, but it also brings new opportunities and growth. I'll adapt and find the positive aspects. Notice how the positive thought feels. It's oriented towards possibilities. It's up to you, of course, to come up with your own statements that genuinely feel good to you. The energy behind the statements should feel open and flowing in the direction of your goal or desire. Think of these positive statements as powerful forces of energy clearing a path in front of you so you can easily take the next step forward. Your ability to clear these resistant thoughts is kind of like having a machete in a thick jungle. So now you may be wondering, how do I uncover these resistant thoughts? Personally, I find the easiest method to be playing the role a therapist might and just asking myself questions like, why does this feel so difficult? Or what am I afraid of? You could also try journaling, therapy, counseling, mindfulness, meditation, and maybe even getting feedback from others. Ultimately, uncovering resistant thought may not even be necessary if it feels easier to you, or if you just prefer it. Simply try focusing on a possibilities oriented statement and just drill that into your mind instead, preferably maybe at night before you fall asleep. Meaning, sometimes instead of spending time trying to figure out how to fix a worn out, outdated computer, aka an old negative thought pattern, it may be easier to just invest in a new state of the art system, aka new positive thought pattern. The whole key is to create good feelings and positive associations in connection with the journey you're taking towards your goal. Really, you want to feel excited. You don't want to feel dread. Dread is a red flag that lets you know you have some resistance. So here's an example of another positive, possibilities oriented general statement that you could focus on. I am making steady progress towards my goals and finding joy and fun in the unfolding. I am resilient and focused. I trust in my abilities and I am manifesting my dreams into reality with passion and focus. So, does this work? Yes, in my experience, it 100% does. Here's a list of just some of the things I've accomplished without forcing myself to do things I didn't want to do. I bought my dream car. I created a consistent exercise habit. I lost 10 pounds. I learned how to do a headstand. I crossed over from making 5 figures to 6 figures yearly. I've paid off thousands in debt. And lastly, a little shameless self-promotion, I created my first digital product, which is a compilation of years of my own personal notes that I would take anytime I was in a funk. If I thought or read or watched or did something that made me feel better, I would take note of it for my future self. So back to the question of whether or not this works. In my experience, it definitely does. You don't have to believe me, and I don't want you to believe me because you can try it for yourself. And there's really nothing to lose. So how do you start? I recommend starting small. For example, I first experimented with learning how to do a headstand. Normally, I would have created a really rigid practice schedule and forced myself to stick to it, forced myself to practice when I didn't feel like it. But instead, I set the intention, learn how to do a yoga headstand and enjoy the process. And then I paid attention to any resistance that came up, and I only followed my genuine impulses to practice. It took me about a month, and when I finally did my first headstand, I was completely sold. The reason I was sold was because I had actually enjoyed the journey, the process of it, almost more so than finally accomplishing the goal. I felt fulfilled. At that point, I knew without a doubt that this approach was the answer I had been looking for. So instead of continuing to hunt for tricks to manipulate yourself into doing things you don't want to do or have resistance towards, work on the valuable skill of finding and clearing your inner resistance. Because as you grow and evolve, there will likely always be new resistance to uncover. So temporary tricks that you use to manipulate yourself only get you so far, and they often just stop working altogether because the novelty wears off. So see it as an ongoing game with yourself. When you feel resistance towards something, instead of force, choose power and ask yourself, why do I feel the need to force myself? I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.